What would you do, dear listeners, if the truth in your heart clashed with the command of a king? Would you choose the safety of obedience, or the courage of conscience? Come with me now to the heart of the mighty Ashanti kingdom, where the golden stool holds the soul of a nation, where Kent cloth tells stories in every thread, and where the drums speak languages older than words themselves. This is the story of Kwame, a boy whose heartbeat synchronized with the rhythm of truth, whose hands could make drums weep with sorrow or dance with joy. They said when Kwame played, even the ancestors stopped their eternal conversations to listen. But what happens when those sacred hands are commanded to lie? In the time when the Ashanti kingdom stretched like a golden eagle across the land, when every beat of the royal drums could summon warriors or declare peace, there lived our young Kwame in the shadow of the great palace of Kumasi. Kwame had no memory of his mother's face, no father's voice to guide him. The fever that swept through their village had taken them both when he was but 5 years old. But the royal drummers, those keepers of rhythm and tradition, they saw something special in the silent, sad-eyed boy. This child, said Master Drummer Ose, his ancient hands examining Kwame's palms, his hands carried the memory of 1,000 songs. And how right he was. From the moment Kwame first touched the sacred atampon drums, magic flowed from his fingertips. The leather sang under his touch, producing sounds that made grown warriors weep and made children laugh with pure delight. But it wasn't just skill that made Kwame special, it was truth. You see, dear listeners, when most people drum, they make noise. When the masters drum, they make music. But when Kwame drummed, he made truth audible. The old women would whisper, "That boy's drum speaks what hearts are too afraid to say." The young mothers would bring their crying babies to him, knowing his gentle rhythms could soothe any sorrow. Even the village dogs would gather in peaceful circles when Kwame practiced. "Remember, young one," Master Ose would tell him, "the drum is not just an instrument, it is the heartbeat of our people. When you play, you speak for those who cannot speak, you remember for those who have forgotten, and you tell truths that power tries to silence." Little did they know how prophetic those words would prove to be. Now, children of the world, let me tell you about King Prempeh, a ruler who had inherited a kingdom of gold and glory, but whose heart had grown heavy with the whispers of ambitious men. King Prempeh was not born evil, no, indeed. In his youth, he had been fair and just. But kings, you see, are surrounded by people who profit from conflict, who whisper of enemies where there are only neighbors, who see war as an opportunity for wealth. His chief advisor, a cunning man named Akoto, had filled the king's ears with lies about the neighboring Denkaira clan. "My lord," Akoto would hiss like a snake, "they mock your power. They say the Ashanti grow soft. Only a show of strength will secure your throne. But we know better, don't we? Akoto owned mines that would profit from war, controlled trade routes that would flourish if the Denkaira were driven away. His loyalty was not to the kingdom, but to his own growing wealth." And young Kwame, living in the royal compound, he heard the servants whisper truths. The Denkaira had sent gifts of friendship. Their children played the same games as Ashanti children. Their harvests were shared with Ashanti villages during times of drought. There was no enemy, only the greed of men who profited from fear. How can I serve a lie with my hands that have only known truth? Kwame wondered, his young heart heavy with the burden of knowledge. The proverb his master had taught him echoed in his mind, "The drumbeat of the lyre may be loud, but it cannot last till dawn." But what could one boy do against the will of a king? The summons came on the day of the new moon, always a day of new beginnings, though this beginning would test everything Kwame believed in. "Kwame, son of drums," King Prempeh's voice echoed through the great hall, "you have been chosen for the greatest honor of your young life." Kwame bowed low, his heart already sensing that this honor would feel more like a curse. "In 3 days' time, during the festival of the Golden Stool, you will drum the call to war. Your beats will tell our people that the Denkaira threaten our peace, that only strength can protect the Ashanti way of life. The king gestured to the great war drums, instruments carved with images of battles, their very appearance designed to stir blood and summon rage. These were not the gentle talking drums Kwame loved, but instruments of intimidation. But, my king, Kwame's voice was barely a whisper, what if the Denkara truly seek peace? The throne room fell silent. Even the advisors stopped their scheming whispers. Boy, the king's voice turned cold as mountain water, are you questioning the wisdom of your king? Do you think your few years of life give you more knowledge than my council of elders? Advisor Akoto stepped forward, his oily voice dripping with false concern. Perhaps the boy is too young for such responsibility, my lord. We could find another drummer, one more reliable. But King Prempe waved him away. No. This boy's drums speak to the people's hearts. When Kwame calls for war, they will answer. When he beats the rhythm of strength, they will feel invincible. You have 3 days to practice, young drummer. Learn the rhythms of war. On the festival day, you will make your people ready to fight. As Kwame left the throne room, his mind reeled with the impossibility of his situation. How could hands that had only spoken truth now be commanded to spread lies? How could drums that had always healed hearts now be used to harden them for war? The boy who had never known fear now trembled at the choice before him. That night, Kwame could not sleep. He sat in the royal courtyard, his hands resting on his faithful talking drums, seeking answers in their familiar warmth. "Oh, spirit of my ancestors," he whispered to the night air, "what am I to do? How can I serve my king and serve the truth?" And then, dear listeners, something magical happened. As if responding to his desperate plea, the very air around Kwame began to shimmer and dance. The shadows took on familiar shapes, the spirits of the great drummers who had come before him. First came the spirit of his beloved master Ose, the old drummer who had raised him, who had died just 2 seasons past. "My child," the spirit's voice was like the whisper of wind through leaves, "remember what I taught you. The drum serves not the throne, but the truth. Kings may command your hands, but only your heart can guide your spirit." Then came others, drummers from generations past, each carrying the wisdom of their time. An ancient woman who had drummed for the first Ashanti queen. A young man who had drummed warnings of floods that saved hundreds of lives. A grandfather who had drummed peace treaties that lasted 50 years. Child of rhythm, they spoke in harmony, their voices creating a celestial drum circle. Power may command the hand, but only truth can guide the heart. As the spirits faded, Kwame fell into a deep sleep, and in his dreams, he walked through a forest where every tree pulsed with the heartbeat of truth. The path before him split in 2 directions. One path led to a dark castle where his hands moved, but his heart remained silent. The other led to a circle of light where his drum sang with such truth that even the stones wept with joy. And there, at the crossroads of his dream, stood a woman he had not seen since childhood, his mother, her face radiant with love and wisdom. "My precious son," she said, her voice like the sweetest lullaby, "I gave you life not so you could live in fear, but so you could choose courage when courage was needed most. Your drums are not just instruments, they are your voice, your truth, your gift to the world. But what if they punish me, mother? What if speaking truth cost me everything?" His mother's spirit smiled with infinite tenderness. "My child, the greatest punishment is not what others do to your body, but what you do to your own soul when you betray your truth. Better to face a king's anger with a pure heart than to live with a heart poisoned by lies." Kwame woke at dawn with tears on his cheeks but still in his spine. The ancestors had spoken. His mother had blessed him. Now he knew what he must do. The day of the festival of the golden stool dawned bright and golden, as if the sun itself was celebrating with the Ashanti people. From every corner of the kingdom, people had come, chiefs in their ceremonial robes, warriors with their spears gleaming, mothers with babies on their backs, children wide-eyed with wonder. At the center of it all sat the golden stool, not a throne for sitting, but the sacred symbol that held the soul of the Ashanti nation. Legend said it had descended from the sky, carrying the spirit of all Ashanti people within its golden form. King Prempeh appeared in robes that seemed to capture sunlight itself, gold threads weaving stories of victory across royal Kent cloth. The crowd roared its approval, but Kwame noticed something in the king's eyes: uncertainty, perhaps even fear. Beside him, advisor Akoto whispered urgently, his eyes gleaming with anticipation of the war profits that would soon flow his way. And then came the moment of truth. Kwame approached the great war drums, his heart pounding louder than any rhythm he had ever played. The crowd fell silent, even the babies stopped their crying, as if they sensed that something momentous was about to happen. His hands trembled as they found their position above the drums. He could feel the eyes of thousands upon him, the king's commanding gaze, the advisor's eager anticipation, the people's trusting expectation. At first, Kwame began to play as commanded. The drums spoke of threats and enemies, of strength through force, of the need to prepare for war. The crowd stirred, their faces beginning to harden with anger they had not felt moments before. But then, something shifted in Kwame's very soul. The spirit of his ancestors seemed to flow through his hands, his mother's love filled his heart, and Master Ose's wisdom guided his movements. The rhythm changed. Oh, dear listeners, if you could have heard the music that flowed from Kwame's drums in that moment. No longer the harsh call to war, but something far more powerful, the gentle, insistent rhythm of truth itself. The drums began to tell a different story. They spoke of Denkaira children playing the same games as Ashanti children. They told of shared harvest and mutual aid during difficult seasons. They revealed the lies whispered in royal ears by men who profited from conflict. Advisor Akoto's face went white with panic. "Stop him," he hissed to the guards, but the crowd had begun to sway with Kwame's rhythm, and even the guards found themselves moved by the power of his truth. King Prempeh rose from his throne, his face dark with royal fury. "Silence," he roared, but Kwame's drums had found their voice and would not be silenced. The rhythm grew stronger, more insistent. Through the language of drums, that ancient tongue understood by every Ashanti heart, Kwame told the real story. He drummed the truth about peace offerings twisted into insults. He revealed how trade disputes had been inflated into threats of war. He exposed how advisors grew rich while common people prepared to die for lies. A murmur rose from the crowd, growing into voices of recognition and anger, not at the Denkaira, but at the deception that had nearly led them to war. "It's true," called out an old chief. "The Denkaira elder visited my village just last month, bringing gifts for our children. My daughter trades peacefully with Denkaira women every market day," shouted a mother. As the truth spread through the crowd like wildfire, Advisor Akoto and his conspirators began to edge toward the exits, their schemes crumbling under the power of one boy's courage. But it was King Prempeh's face that told the deeper story. The royal fury was fading, replaced by something far more complex, the dawning realization that he had been played like a drum in the hands of manipulative men. And still Kwame played, his hands moving with a life of their own, his drums singing of unity instead of division, of wisdom instead of war, of love instead of fear. The boy who had trembled with uncertainty that morning now stood firm as an iroko tree, his truth flowing through his fingertips to touch every heart in the kingdom. "Enough." King Prempeh's voice thundered across the courtyard like a storm breaking. "Boy, you dare defy your king. You dare spread your own version of truth in my presence." Kwame's hands finally stilled on the drums, but he did not cower. Instead, he stood tall as a 14-year-old boy could stand, and looked directly into his king's eyes. "My lord," his young voice carried clearly across the silent courtyard, "I have not spoken my truth. I have drummed the truth of our ancestors, the truth that lives in the heart of our people, the truth that serves not my will, but the good of all Ashanti." The crowd held its breath. To speak so boldly to a king could mean death, yet they could not help but admire the boy's courage. Then, like the first drops of rain before a healing storm, the elders began to speak. Old Chief Kwaku stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of decades. My king, the boy speaks what we have all seen but feared to voice. The drums have always been the voice of our ancestors, and our ancestors do not lie. Elder after elder stepped forward. The keeper of oral traditions, the master of ceremonies, the wisest grandmothers of the kingdom, all lending their voices to support the truth Kwame had drummed. Desperate to salvage his schemes, advisor Akoto pushed forward. My king, do not let them turn you against your own authority. A kingdom where children dictate to kings is no kingdom at all. But King Prempeh was no fool. Looking around at his people, really seeing them for the first time in months, he saw not subjects eager for war, but families hoping for peace. Not warriors thirsting for blood, but farmers wanting to tend their crops without fear. Akoto, the king said slowly, his voice heavy with the weight of realization, tell me truly, what do you gain if we go to war with the Denkara? The advisor's face went pale. My lord, I serve only your glory. Answer the question. The king's voice was still wrapped in silk. What do you gain? And there, before the entire kingdom, the ugly truth spilled out. The mines that would flourish if the Denkara were driven from their lands. The trade routes that would fill Akoto's coffers. The weapons contracts that would make him rich while others died. The crowd's anger, which had been directed at a peaceful neighboring clan, now found its proper target. Voices rose in outrage at the deception, at the manipulation of their love for their kingdom. King Prempeh stood in the center of his kingdom, surrounded by the truth he had been too proud to see. Slowly, deliberately, he removed the war ornaments from his royal robes. People of Ashanti, his voice carried across the silent courtyard, your king has been a fool. I allowed fear to close my ears to wisdom, allowed pride to blind my eyes to truth. He approached Kwame, and for a moment that seemed to last forever, king and drummer boy faced each other, power and truth standing eye to eye. Young Kwame, the king said, his voice gentle now, you have done what my council of advisors could not do. You have served your king by serving your people. You have honored your throne by honoring the truth. And then, in a gesture that would be remembered for generations, King Prempeh placed his royal hand on Kwame's young shoulder. From this day forward, he declared to the assembled kingdom, let it be known that the drums of Ashanti serve not just the throne, but the truth. And let this boy be known not just as a drummer, but as the drummer of truth, a reminder to all future kings that power without wisdom is tyranny, and wisdom without courage is useless. The crowd erupted. Not in the war cries that had been planned, but in celebration of peace, of truth, of the courage of one small boy who had saved them from a war built on lies. As for advisor Akoto and his conspirators, they were stripped of their positions and sent into exile, their schemes crumbling like houses built on sand. And Kwame, the orphan boy who had trembled at the thought of defying his king, now found himself surrounded by the love of an entire kingdom. Children reached out to touch his drums, families blessed his name, and elders spoke of the day when courage wore the face of a child. Within days, messengers were sent to the Denkara people, not with declarations of war, but with invitations to renewed friendship. The children of both clans played together again, the traders returned to their peaceful commerce, and the threat of war dissolved like morning mist before the sun. Years passed, dear listeners, and young Kwame grew into Master Kwame, the most beloved drummer in the kingdom's history. But he never forgot the lesson of that festival day, that truth, no matter how small its voice, can shake the foundations of the mightiest lies. He established a school for young drummers, teaching them not just the techniques of rhythm, but the sacred responsibility of truth-telling. Remember, he would tell each new student, your drums are not just instruments of music, they are instruments of justice. Every year, on the anniversary of that momentous festival of the Golden Stool, the kingdom celebrated not with war drums but with the rhythms of peace. They called it the Festival of Truth, and children from both Ashanti and Denkara clans would come to learn the story of the boy who chose conscience over comfort. King Prempeh ruled for many more years, but never again without consulting the voices of his people. He kept Master Kwame close to his court, not as a servant, but as a counselor whose drums could always be trusted to speak truth. And the drums themselves. They were housed in a special place of honor, with an inscription that read, "Here stand the drums that taught a kingdom that power may command the hand, but only truth can guide the heart." But tell me, children of the world, what about you? In your own life, when the voice of convenience whispers louder than the voice of conscience, when going along with the crowd seems easier than standing for what's right, when power offers rewards for your silence, what choice do you make? Are you content to beat the rhythms others demand, or do you have the courage of Kwame, to let your own heart's truth guide your hands? Remember the proverb that echoed through our story: power may command the hand, but only truth can guide the heart. And so ends our tale of the drama of truth. But the questions it asks echo still: what choice would you have made if you were Kwame? Would you have obeyed the king, comfortable in your safety, or honored your heart, knowing the risks that truth demands? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between what was expected and what was right? Share your story in the comments below. Your courage might inspire someone else to find their own voice of truth. Next week, we journey to the ancient kingdom of Kush, where a young scribe must decide whether to record the king's version of history, or the truth she witnessed with her own eyes. Another tale of courage, another choice between comfort and conscience. Thank you for joining me in the kingdom of the Ashanti tonight. Remember, every time you choose truth over convenience, every time you let your conscience guide your actions instead of fear, you honor the courage of all who came before us, and you light the way for all who come after. Until next time, may your own life beat with the rhythm of truth. This is Ancestral Echoes by Hoberty. Keep listening to the wisdom that never grows old.